Welcome to the Intuitive Therapist Podcast with Janis R. Cohen, therapist, clairvoyant, empath, and medium. Listen in as she takes a no-nonsense deep dive into real human struggles and how to resolve them. Janis will share channeled information from her spirit guide team, as well as the angels and archangels, to help you master your emotional, physical, financial, and spiritual destiny. And now, Janis R. Cohen. Hey y'all, this is Janis Cohen, the Intuitive Therapist here on the Intuitive Therapist Podcast. I want to welcome you to another episode. We are in December, holy moly. And today we're going to explore something profound yet elusive. How to know when you have mastered a spiritual soul lesson. And every soul has its own journey. I think you know that, filled with unique lessons and challenges and transformations. But how do you know when you've really mastered a lesson? What are the signs? And more importantly, what's next once you do? So let's break it down. We're going to start by defining what it means to master a spiritual soul lesson. We're going to understand why it matters and talk about how to recognize when you have actually reached that milestone of your growth. I'm also going to share powerful questions, which I love to do, and then some strategies that I think are going to help you fully embody and integrate your growth. So let's dive in, y'all. Now, a spiritual soul lesson, it's a profound and often like life-altering teaching or insight, okay? And it comes from our most challenging experiences. I can think back on to many spiritual soul lessons. One predominant one that I know everybody has to learn is fidelity to self. And fidelity to self, my spirit dropped that into my life years ago. I think it was around 2008, 2009, when I experienced a series of betrayals. And I had no idea what that meant. Why in the hell am I experiencing these things, right? And then Spirit dropped this golden nugget in my head of Janis. The more fidelity you practice to self, the less betrayal and infidelity you'll experience on the outside. And I was like, whoa. And so I think I ended up writing a PDF book called Freedom from Betrayal, and it documented all the steps that Spirit gave me about how to deal with that. And so that was a huge soul lesson for me. And the minute I got that, and the minute I started to understand what that actually meant, fidelity to self, it meant that I put myself first. It meant that I trust my gut first. It means that I don't look away from red flags and make them yellow. Whatever it means to be faithful to me, always, first, foremost, 100% of the time, I will eliminate the betrayal experience. And I did. And so I invite you to think about that. Maybe that's a lesson for you, right? So anything, I'll say this over and over and over again in every podcast, any experience you have on the outside of you is a teaching moment for you, right? People who show up in your life, even in the most painful ways, and hurt you in the deepest ways, you have called that in, and you didn't learn sooner. So the lesson had to become harder and more painful. And sometimes we need the most painful experiences in order to wake up to ourselves so that we can actually learn and put that boundary in place and become more, I don't know, a word for fidelity, more committed to our own sense of safety and self-respect. So we get these insights, these ahas, these, just like I did, that was a story of that, right? All from challenging experiences. We're supposed to go through these hard times. And it's not a one-time epiphany or a simple aha moment, right? It's a recurring theme that keeps showing up in our lives. Like I told you, like I experienced betrayal in a bunch of different ways. And until you finally get it, right, on a deep cellular level, you're going to keep calling that experience in over and over and over and over again. So each soul lesson, it offers us a chance to learn something essential, whether it's self-worth, forgiveness, resilience, authenticity, compassion, self-love. These lessons invite us to evolve, releasing old patterns that no longer serve us so that we can move closer to our true selves, which is, in essence, the wholeness of who we are. So why is it important to master these lessons? Why should you care? So because each lesson, it's each lesson that you master, it really is a milestone because it changes the trajectory of your life. It's almost like you get another notch in the belt. And if you imagine the ascension model, right, they show me the ascension model spiritually, you literally go from step to step to step to step. And each time the step gets easier and easier. But here's the thing. The learning curve could be steeper. And that I know that's what I found. The bigger the lesson, the steeper the climb. And so as we learn and integrate these lessons, we shed layers of conditioning and we step into a more empowered, authentic version of who we are because we're paying attention to ourselves. We're honoring ourselves. We're building self-confidence, self-respect, right, for ourselves. And it's a cycle of growth. And when we've truly mastered a lesson, we experience the sense of freedom from the old patterns. And there's an inner peace that's automatically cultivated. It's like you just know you don't have to deal with that anymore because you have such a sense of strength within. You will never allow X, Y, or Z to happen again. You will never do A, B, or C again. You will always do 1, 2, and 3. Does that make sense? So mastering a soul lesson, it doesn't mean we're done growing, but it does mean that we've closed a chapter and are ready for the next level of our spiritual evolution. So it doesn't end. We're always going to hit obstacles. But if you finally look at life as, okay, look, I know shit's going to come my way and I get to overcome it. I may hate it while I'm in it, but I know on the other side, there's unbelievable joy and an incredible amount of accomplishment on the other side. So let's take a moment, and I want to invite you to think about a challenge that's shown up repeatedly in your life. Like I said, betrayal, maybe it's financial loss, maybe it's dating the same kind of person over and over and over again, and you're like, I don't understand why I keep calling in these assholes or these really cold people who are emotionally unavailable, right? So then I want you to think about what happened that those patterns stopped appearing in your life. What did you do differently? What new boundaries did you develop? What new things did you decide to believe? What was the point at which you said, no more of this? It's time for a change. No more. That's when you know you've learned a soul lesson. And perhaps it's something you finally learned to navigate with ease or compassion, right? That's what mastery feels like. We're shooting for mastery. When you've mastered something, you've learned it. You don't need to keep learning it. That's the thing. See, you've drawn a line with yourself. And if you've listened to me long enough, you know that everything you experience in your outside world is always connected to who you are on the inside. Period. End of story. And once you shore yourself up, life always changes on the outside to match your growth and maturity. It's that moment when the struggle loses its grip on you because you've integrated the lesson so fully that it no longer has power over you and it doesn't need to happen again. So, as we explore how to recognize this mastery, here are 3 questions I want you to consider, right? These are going to help you determine if you've truly internalized a lesson or if there's more work to do. So the first question is, how am I responding differently to situations that once triggered me? Now, mastery often shows up in how we respond rather than react. So pay attention to whether you can handle familiar situations with more ease, compassion, and clarity. And if you still find yourself triggered in any way, you've not mastered the lesson. You'll know when you've mastered a lesson when either it no longer appears in your life, like I mentioned before, or when you're no longer triggered by the behavior anymore. You're like, oh, well, that's interesting that that person did that. Huh. Okay. Right? There's a detachment, emotional detachment to it. There's no longer an emotional charge. Now, the second question is, am I feeling peace and acceptance with this part of my journey? And when you've mastered a lesson, the emotional charge, like I just said, around it tends to fade. And this is the trigger part that I mentioned, right? So I want you to ask yourself, if there is any part of this I still don't feel at peace with, then that's where further introspection needs to happen with you, right? If there's any part of you that's unsettled, you still have like a, hangnail about it. Work on yourself, fix that so you can remove the hangnail and you're good. And the third question is, what beliefs or stories have I released and what new truths have taken their place? This is a huge one because it always happens that way. The minute you release an old pattern, a truth comes. It's revelatory, right? So mastering a soul lesson means you no longer hold on to limiting beliefs or old narratives because you have put your foot down about them. You have a new boundary. You have a new commitment, not an interest. You are committed to that thing never happening again. And nobody can take that from you. So it means you've learned to define yourself in a much more powerful way and that you've decided to believe new and better things about you and your life. It is inevitable that when you develop new commitments and you end life patterns and you master life lessons, you automatically feel better about who you are. Period. And you call better people and better experiences into your life. Okay, so now that we've talked about these 3 questions, I want to talk about some strategies that are going to help you recognize and fully embody the mastery of your soul lessons. And the first strategy is to practice self-observation and reflection. This, for me, once I learned this, and I learned it in a very big way last December. I had what was called a winter period, and I didn't understand it then, but of course, hindsight is 2020, and I look back and I go, oh my gosh, that was such a powerful period of my life. For 3 months, I received no inspiration to do work. Nothing was coming to me. Nothing. And so every time I leaned into my keyboard or to try to create something or to push, literally I felt, I kid you not, hands on my shoulders pulling me back into my chair. And the advice was, Janis, be. Just be. Stop doing. Just be. And then over the course of this winter period of mine, I all of a sudden became aware of what I was thinking, aware of how my ego was fucking with my head, aware of the conversations that I'm having. I'm like, who is this person talking to me this way? And I was like, that is my ego. Well, let's do some work here. So what Spirit showed me, the analogy was, Janis, who you are, it's the awareness of who you are. And so it's as if you're looking at yourself on a split screen. The first, the one on the right, is the natural, real you. The one on the left is the ego, the thoughts, the beliefs, that all limit you. So you get a chance to, which is what we've been doing with you, is we're pulling you back in your chair to get a more distanced view of what's going on. And so once I realized that was happening, I was like, holy moly, this was beautiful. And then I became curious instead of convicted. I talk about that all the time. You've heard me talk about that, where instead of believing the thoughts that come in my mind as truth, and I'm convicted by them, I get curious. I go, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why I thought this thought. I wonder what that's about. And it gives me a beat. It gives me a moment to consider whether or not that kind of thought registers as true for me in my body, right? So one of the most reliable ways to gauge your growth is through self-observation. So take time in every moment you got, right? But each week, and even just 10 minutes, to sit down and reflect on recent experiences and how you reacted to them. Did you respond? Did you react? Did you feel pissed? Did you feel sad? What was the emotional response? Journaling can be especially powerful here. So write down moments when you feel challenged and explore how you could handle them differently than you did before, right? So it's so important that whenever you feel triggered, that you understand there is something in you that isn't cleaned up. And you got to do the work to clean it up. Why did that bother me? Why did I feel disrespected? Why do I feel thrown away? Why do I feel shut out? Well, why are you doing that to you? Anybody who shows up with behavior that hurts you or that pushes you to feel something is you actually doing it to yourself. So the question you ask yourself is, okay, I noticed that I'm feeling this way because of this person. And here's the question: in what ways am I doing that to me? Because they wouldn't show up otherwise. Now, this allows you to see patterns in real time and to celebrate the moments when you've handled something with newfound grace, clarity, and strength. And as you do this consistently, you'll start noticing subtle shifts that signal you're no longer in the same place that you once were, right? Self-observation, to become curious, not convicted. Now, the second is embracing triggers as teachers. I talk about this all the time. If there's another soul lesson that I have learned in my life, it is that. And I love that I learned that, because there's nothing that happens that isn't a message for me. Nothing, right? And for you. So often the universe sends us little tests to see if we've really mastered a lesson. Oh, God, I have so many stories about that. And these can come in the forms of people or situations that push our buttons, right? When these arise, rather than getting frustrated, see them as opportunities to become curious, right? Learn to say this to yourself: oh, isn't this interesting that this showed up? Wonder what I need to learn from this, right? Now, when you're able to see a trigger without getting triggered and getting reactive, or when you can respond with compassion where you once felt anger, you're embodying your mastery. By embracing these triggers as teachers, you deepen your understanding of the lesson and you create a solid foundation of growth. It's just automatic. Now, strategy number 3. Most of us don't do this, but I encourage you to. Celebrate the peace and freedom of letting go. So often we are so conditioned to go on to the next thing that we don't take a moment to stop and honor where we've been, what we've just learned. We need to do more of that. So mastering a soul lesson often means that you have let go of old baggage or limiting beliefs. That's fucking huge. Allow yourself to celebrate that. And when you find yourself free from a once persistent fear or self-doubt, take the time to honor that victory, because it's unbelievably huge. Huge accomplishment. And I can't tell you how much freer I felt over the years as I've release those big challenges from my life. It's like I've unburned myself and I'm like, I'm not responsible for that anymore. I've done the work, right? Can you look back at yourself and laugh at how far you've come? If you think about it, that all of those previous versions of yourself, most of them are gone, but some of them continue to exist because you've got to grow out of them. But if you look at who you are now, and of course, with age comes wisdom, you've grown, you've learned. Who are you now based on what you've experienced and what you've learned? How can you celebrate your personal growth? As it solidifies, it's a powerful way of telling yourself that you've arrived in a new chapter by celebrating. You're freer, you're lighter, and you're ready to step forward. And sometimes it's enough to say, oh my God, I don't have to deal with that anymore. I'm so glad. Life is always going to present you with opportunities to grow and evolve. But each lesson that you master is a testament to your resilience, your courage, and the wisdom you've gained along the way. 100%, right? You got to acknowledge those victories. They're milestones that mark your progress, and they remind you of how far you've come. Now, before we close, I want to invite you to lean into these questions that I share with you and the strategies. Reflect on it, write about it, or discuss it with somebody you trust. And if this episode resonates with you, share it with somebody who you feel like would be helped by it. And don't forget to get them to subscribe. And by all means, you know what? I love the reviews of my podcast. I invite you to write a review. Please share what some of your greatest ahas are, what has helped, how have you grown, how have you shifted. It would mean a great deal for me if you wrote a review and rated my podcast. So I'm doing this because I want to help the masses, and I hope I can actually help some of you out there. So thank you for being here with me. I want to encourage you to keep growing, keep evolving, and know that every step you take brings you closer to wholeness. So until next time, I wish you a blessed day, a wonderful week, and as always, live intuitively.
Thanks for listening to The Intuitive Therapist. If you like what you heard, the best compliment you can give us is to share this podcast with a friend. And be sure to give us some stars and a favorable review at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen in.